Hello, everybody. Today was the final cut down day for every team around the NFL. Minnesota made a few more controversial decisions than they usually do. The cutting of Alex Boone led the way in that. He was a starting left guard for them last year, who I thought played at a very solid or average kind of rate. Maybe nothing special, but certainly someone that deserved to be on a roster, which kind of begs the question, could this be his personality? And then there was another thing where like he wasn't accepting a pay cut with the team, so they kind of, instead of just having him be a very expensive backup to what I assume will be Nick Easton, an elf line at center, would be just to cut him loose, and that's what they ended up doing. So I read that there's possible interest from the Dolphins, and I wouldn't be surprised about the Packers going to get him either because they did lose some guards, and whether it be due to injury or TJ Lang leaving. So him going over to the division rival wouldn't be that surprising at all. Taylor Heineke is another one that was a little off the wall there. I know everyone in Minnesota loves him. I was never that enamored with him, especially during this preseason, because I think I've seen more passes of his fall into the dirt than I have in any other year. So yeah, it's I don't view, like, I know technically that could be viewed as a surprise cut, especially since they usually carry three quarterbacks on the roster and they cut Mitch Leitner, but that one could be a little shocking to some people. And then there was Edmund Robinson as another kind of surprising guy that was let go. Edmund Robinson was the initial guy getting the first team reps at the weak side linebacker spot, where Chad Greenway kind of left a void. Like when we came into minicamp, he was the guy taking most of the reps. I know Lemur was kind of shaking a bit. He was a little bit having an injury problem at the time, so I don't know how much that really put into it. But he's not on the team anymore, so Edmund Robinson's gone. I thought that was a little shocking. I actually thought Edmund played okay enough to have a roster spot. I I honestly thought Lemur would be gone, not Edmund Robinson. So there's that. And then Teddy Bridgewater was officially put on the physically unable to perform list. Now, this opens a whole thing for his contract because if he's on it for the first 6 weeks, which he's pretty much designated to, if they're on it for more than that, I believe his contract tolls over. I don't know if that stays or not, if he is activated from the pup to the active roster, but even he may not play all year. Wouldn't surprise me to see him not play all year. His contract would toll over, and then we have that entire thing between him and Sam. So we'll probably leave that conversation for another day, as that can be a whole video by itself. You have the NFI list, who was Sharif Floyd, and we all know what happened with Sharif Floyd. They said there's a possibility of him coming back a few weeks ago. I don't know how much of that is really true, but maybe. If so, they are prepared to play without him. On IR goes Dayton Jones, the signing from Green Bay. That's probably going to be a one and done thing. I can't imagine him coming back after this year. And then Michael Floyd is suspended, so none of those guys count against the 53 roster. None of those guys. So there is that. Michael Floyd, that could be a whole interesting thing by itself, just because if Treadwell doesn't seize this opportunity the way he probably should, we pretty much go from, like, we need Michael Floyd to come in, but if Treadwell actually does what he's supposed to do, I think the hope is that, he plays well, and then we kind of tell Michael Floyd, like, no, we don't. You'll still be on the team, but it's more of a fourth receiver thing. So you're not looking at him. So hopefully we prefer it to be like that rather than, oh, we really need this guy. So that would be better to me, honestly, if Treadwell came on, other than Floyd, because we know Floyd can play. But if Treadwell can play, I think they'd rather go with Treadwell, just because, well, one, they drafted him, and two, he's younger. So yeah, and I do have a possible practice squad just from the players they cut. Like the 53-man roster could look totally different by the end of this week just because of waivers and how many people were cut today. So this is based off just who they cut. I'm not looking at other teams and what they cut to put on our practice squad. This is strictly what they have. I have two quarterbacks on the list, but I put a slash on one just because I think they'll only carry one if they carry one. Because they usually only carry three. To me, carrying Keenum and Sam plus one of the two on the practice squad would kind of be like carrying three. So it will either be Taylor or Mitch, and then the other one would, and then whoever isn't on that, the other option I think would be Sam McCaskill, the defensive end. I've heard they like him quite a bit. Kyle Carter's my other one, the athletic tight end from Penn State. I believe he showed enough to at least be on that. I don't think he's, really going to crack the 53 unless Bucky or Rudolph really gets hurt, just because he's more of a receiving tight end than he is a blocking tight end. So I think with David Morgan, we're looking somewhere else entirely. Ifadi and Deningbo, the defensive end that we drafted, he was cut today. He was a 7th round pick, and 3 years as a starter, I believe he had like 27, 28 sacks as a part-time nickel rusher, basically. Someone can correct me on the stats if I'm wrong on that. But I know he holds the record at Northwestern for career sacks. So I think he obviously has the talent, he has size, he's shown burst, he just needs to refine it, basically. So he seems like an ideal guy to put on the practice squad if he can get through waivers. Elijah Lee is another one of those guys where we cut 3 of the 4 7th rounders. The only one making it, Stacy Coley, which doesn't surprise me at all. But Elijah Lee is he's another raw athletic guy that would make a lot of sense to stash there, especially since he would be playing that weak side linebacker spot, which currently Ben Gideon is playing, I believe, unless they throw a curveball and start Emmanuel Lemur there. So having him on the practice squad just learning for a year might be able to replace Lemur next year. So that would make sense to me. Horace Richardson's another guy I read they like a lot. I saw him a lot on the nickel blitz when I watched. Other than that, he was kind of average as a corner. So if he can get through, I wouldn't be surprised if he landed on this. Dylan Bradley is the one I really think will make it onto this. He is a undersized defensive tackle that has been kind of on their radar since a little bit before the draft. And you just kept hearing and hearing and hearing about it. Much like Elijah Lee, he was another one of those guys that you would just constantly hear about. So I believe him and Lee could definitely make it to the practice squad, as Dylan Bradley is he's undersized and probably not really strong enough yet. So you want to get him in and bulk him up, really, for maybe a year or two. So we might spend 2 years on the practice squad before even thinking about cracking the 53. The other one I have on here is Jack Tocho, the safety, just because the safety depth last year was so bad. Like when Harrison Smith got hurt, we had no answer for that. Anthony Harris was horrible in that Colt game, which I'm sorry to bring that one up again. That one was not good, to say the least. But Tocho would provide some kind of depth if push came to shove, essentially. Like, it's not ideal, but at least there's someone there that knows the system. That's kind of my theory with that, plus they drafted him. Now, the 9th one I have on here is Willie Beavers. They cut him again, but I do think he showed improvement this year. I really think he just needs to cut his weight down so he can play longer, because he does kind of tear off at the end. I don't know if that's because he's not conditioned or what the deal is there, but he's rolling at probably 325 to 335 right now. If he can get down to 315, 310, we're probably looking at a guy who could play a full game, which would be very ideal, just in general. But he was a fourth round draft pick in 2016. It's been disappointing to say the least since that happened, because he got cut his rookie year as well. So he's kind of like TJ Clemmings in that sense, just another disappointing fourth round project. But maybe can be decent depth if developed the right way. That's kind of what I think of Willie Beavers right now. He's a big athletic guy. I think he's strong enough to play. I just think he needs to cut the weight down and refine once again with the refining. Terrell Newby is my 10th guy for this. He's a running back, so he's very shifty. He's smaller. He's kind of more of a receiving back, kind of like the scat back kind of guy. So he's pretty much I kept him there just because if McKinnon went down, we have no one of that breed of skill set otherwise. I mean, you could say Dalvin is kind of like that, but I mean, I think he's more of a well balanced guy, and he's just very good at very many different things. So I wouldn't necessarily just pencil him in as just a scat back. I do think he does run with some power, and he does break tackles consistently, so I'm not willing just to call him just a scat back. He's more than that, and I do think he'll have a pretty solid year. I say pretty solid because we still do have Latavius Murray, who I assume will be a touchdown vulture for him. So if you play fantasy. And so Terrell Newby, I would say maybe if McKinnon got hurt, that's an option. Although, what do you guys think of the Alex Boone cutting? Because I feel very mixed. Because part of me thinks maybe it's because of his personality and, well, a combination of that plus the contract that he declined to take a pay cut on. So I do think that could be it, just because the rest of that group is kind of more of a soft-spoken, grinding kind of professional unit. And then you have Boone, who's kind of in there cursing all over the place and more colorful personality. And then you did have Shermer a few weeks ago, who was asked about Boone's leadership, and then he pretty much threw it away, the question, and then eventually came to a point where he said that sometimes the loudest guys are the furthest away from it. So I don't know if Boone was one of, if all of this just together came into it, because if you look at his skill set in his own blocking scheme, it should work for the most part. He's one of the more athletic guards in the league. He's pretty good at pass protection. He just really kind of blocking on the move was a little below average, but outside of that, he's a guy that definitely deserves a roster spot and a starting spot on some team in the league. So I don't know how I feel about that, because Nick Easton, we've seen him at center, and we've seen him a little bit at guard this preseason. But if they're going strictly by performance, it's a little unethical just to go off of basically the Seattle game, one preseason game, to start Easton and cut Boone for it. So unless there's some kind of trade they're hoping to get done tonight or tomorrow, that and I would think Easton's the guy otherwise. So yeah, I don't know what you guys think about the Alex Boone cutting. I I do have mixed feelings about it, because the line worked better with Elfline and Easton in the middle as opposed to the other way around, which was mainly Easton and Boone in the third game. I don't think we played Elfline with the ones in the third game. We might have, but not much. So, and even then, I know Elfline hasn't played much with Boone, so we're basically just putting two guys in there that know how they work, which is very key when you're talking about the offensive line, so they can work as a whole unit as opposed to just individual, which I do think is another factor in this. They played better as a group, even though he is the better individual player. So if if we're playing better together as a group, it actually works, as opposed to where you have the better individual player out there, but they don't know how he necessarily does things. And when you're talking about blitz pickups and all that, that really factors in. So there's all of that that goes into it. So that could have been another thing. I don't know, there's a lot that could have gone wrong with Boone. Uh, they're kind of admitting defeat on that signing, even though he played average. I think the scheme fit, maybe changing schemes. They thought he wasn't that good of a fit, even though I think his skill set could have translated over to it. It's just a little iffy. And I always thought he could be a better right tackle than he could be a guard anyway, just because of his height at 6'8". So usually you don't see 6'8" guards just because quarterbacks have to throw over the guard. So I thought it would almost make more sense to flip Remmers, who struggles on an island with speed on the outside. Why not just flip him and Boone like that, basically? Which I thought about that, but then I was thinking that's probably too much. So I didn't expect that to happen. That was kind of just a thought. But yeah, so tell me what you guys think about Boone. I would like to know what the rest of the fan base thinks about this. I'm really not sure how to feel about it. I do think the Dayton Jones one was a failed experiment, obviously with him ending on IR. So I think that's definitely one and done. Definitely one and done. And just for another question for you guys, Heineke or Leitner, which one would you guys prefer to see on the practice squad? I personally think at this point I would prefer Leitner, just because he is I think he's younger. Pretty sure he's younger. I should have looked that up, but I just think with how Heineke played this preseason, it's just hard. It's just really hard. He had the good drive against the Niners to bring us back and win that game in the preseason. But outside of that, it was not good. You saw he had a horrible interception in the Buffalo game, and then he just constantly was throwing balls in the dirt. I just can't see how that would work out that well. But outside of that, tell me what you guys think about all this. And until then, farewell.